With Tyrann Mathieu back on the field for the New Orleans Saints, the Saints defense just became one of the best in the NFL. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media. You can find me every day over at USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at BetterHelp. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. And they have a special offer just for Locked On Sports listeners. Get 10% off of your first month by heading over to betterhelp.com/locked on. On today's episode, the Honey Badger is back in New Orleans. Therefore, the New Orleans Saints defense, and one of the best defenses in the NFL, is now fully assembled. What it means for the team. We'll also break down what it means for Michael Thomas and the New Orleans Saints, as he made a key step forward in his progression. We'll also discuss Gardner Johnson's contract conversation and the way that we hope that will work out in New Orleans. And we'll get to your questions, including how the New Orleans Saints offense might change schematically going into 2022. But to kick everything off here, we're going to start with the Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, returning to Airline Drive on Wednesday. If you caught the live episode, either live or later from earlier today, kind of broke down a little bit of his performance. But just as a quick refresher, he didn't take part in 7-on-7 drills or team drills. He was there in the walkthrough. He was there for individual drills, a little bit of position drills. But that was kind of all that he was a part of. Opposite that, or outside of that, he was kind of just watching along, maybe working off to the sideline. There was a nice moment that I happened to catch to where he and Corey Robinson were over on the sideline, who is one of the defensive assistants for the New Orleans Saints coaching staff that works specifically with the secondary. Used to be the Maryland Terrapins, I believe, defensive backs coach there. And then, Chris Richard coming over, and you could already see them kind of cooking up and maybe scheming a little bit and figuring out exactly, having those conversations. But great to see that conversation already happening off to the sideline. But this isn't a surprise. Head coach Dennis Allen talked about how there would be a little bit of a ramp up for Tyrann Mathieu. And the Saints are playing this wisely, right? Like, they're treating this like it's an injured player coming back, but in a little bit of a truncated sense. You look at Ryan Ramczyk. He's not taking part in all of the team drills. He's kind of going in and out. He's somebody that's coming back from injury. Andrews Pete, same thing, coming back from injury, not taking part in all the team drills. Michael Thomas is ramping up, but he's not there yet. So the Saints are wisely making sure that, they don't want a situation to where they cost themselves a key player early on during training camp and all that. So the expectation is that Tyrann Mathieu will eventually, and very soon actually, be a part of team drills and be full go and all that. It's a little bit about catching him up on his conditioning a bit, stuff like that. But they can't put him on the PUP list because training camp has already started, blah, 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 blah. So the logistics are a part of all that in terms of your injury list and your logistical process as a team and navigating all of that stuff. So not a surprise to see him kind of take this a little bit slowly. So once he's all caught up, though, they expect to have him out there pretty much sooner rather than later. Doug Mouton, our colleague from WWL TV, asked if there was anything problematic that Tyrann Mathieu might have missed, or anything that Tyrann Mathieu missed that might have been problematic over the course of the first week. And Dennis Allen was pretty, sure that it's all good. Everything that they were installing at that time, Tyrann Mathieu knows. And so that's just one of those things to where the veteran value is absolutely there. And that veteran value is part of why Tyrann Mathieu's presence makes the New Orleans Saints defense inarguably, you cannot argue with me about it. They are one of the best in the NFL as assembled, right? Now that you got Pete Werner there, now that you've got Tyrann Mathieu coming back, this defense is all there and all together. Now, they might start the season missing a piece in Marcus May, depending upon how his DUI case goes. He might be suspended at the beginning of the season. We'll see how all of that kind of pans out. But once this defense is entirely assembled, it's a massively good one. And Demario Davis talked about that the other day too in his presser, about like acknowledging the dome patrol, but feeling like the New Orleans Saints defense as it's assembled today has a chance to not only be one of the best in the NFL or the best in the NFL this year, but be one of the greats. That's what Demario Davis wants for this defense, considering the way that he highlighted it, that you have top 10 players at just about every position, with Cam Jordan on the edge, arguably David Onyemata as well on the interior when he's really on his game. Demario Davis, of course, in the middle. Marshawn Lattimore on the outside. Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May at safety. Young Paulson Adebo, who's really up and coming right now. CJ Gardner Johnson, who's easily one of the top 3, if not just top 1 slot corners in the NFL. There's a lot here for the New Orleans Saints that once you have that defense fully assembled and out on the field and the chemistry is working and everything is panning out on the field, right? Taking it from paper to the turf, to the grass, right, to the field, then all of a sudden, you know, this New Orleans Saints team is a playoff team as a whole and has a defense that should be a top 5, top 3 defense in yet again in 2022. Remember, they've been a top 5 scoring defense for the past 2 seasons. And so you get Tyrann Mathieu back, you get to borrow from Drew Brees again, the time on task between he and Marcus May and Demario Davis and Cam Jordan as the leaders of this defense. And now you're getting everything in rhythm. You're getting the communication and chemistry down. One of the things that the New Orleans Saints actually had a little bit of an advantage in, even without Tyrann Mathieu throughout the course of camp, is that they had PJ Williams to fall back on, who is the most experienced secondary player that the Saints have in terms of, and when I say secondary player, I just mean defensive back, combination, cornerbacks and safeties. And he's the one with the longest amount of experience within the system. So you didn't really miss a step in terms of knowledge of the system when you didn't have Tyrann Mathieu. Now, you get an upgrade adding Tyrann Mathieu to the scheme, of course, as the talented player that he is. But now you sort of get the multiplicity all over the defense in terms of what Tyrann Mathieu can do down in and down out and how that role can change, what Marcus May can do down in and down out and how that role can change. So you have all of these other pieces. And, you know, PJ Williams is a really, really shining example of somebody that has the ability to revitalize their career by learning 2 other positions, which is what we've seen from PJ Williams, who started off as a outside corner, didn't really work out great for him, but then took off as a slot corner and then now is learning safety and has done really well there over the course of the past couple of seasons. Added some weight. He said he's probably up to about 203, 205 now. So he's a little bit more comfortable taking on tight ends and running backs in the box, all of that. So you have that versatility with a PJ Williams and that key depth piece there. And then you add on top of that now Tyrann Mathieu, who helps to get all of this together. So the Saints were in a really, really good position with PJ because they were still able to run the defense, not really anything hampering there in terms of a system side, but now you get the talent and the brains of the Honey Badger of Tyrann Mathieu in there, and you get Tyrann Mathieu acclimated to the system a little bit more quickly. So I think that those are the values that come with having a guy like Tyrann Mathieu now in the building and ready to go, helping to make this New Orleans Saints defense one of, if not the best defense in the NFL going into 2022 as assembled. Again, a ton of talent all across that defense. It's got to perform, it's got to execute on the field, but with minds like Demario Davis and Tyrann Mathieu and Cam Jordan, there's not a lot of reason to expect that won't happen. And I think that there are a lot of people who are going to say, well, the New Orleans Saints have Tyrann Mathieu of 2022. He's not going to be Tyrann Mathieu of, you know, the LSU days. And like, duh, like, of course that's the case. So you build the scheme around what the players can do now. You don't build the scheme based upon what you think they did years ago. And I've always hated that argument of like, well, he's not going to be what he was 3 years ago. Yeah, that's how time works. Like, everyone gets that. That's not a big shock. And so when you get a guy like Tyrann Mathieu, you're not necessarily looking at what he brings based upon what he's already done. You're projecting forward based upon what his clear acuity, what his clear talent is, and what that adds to an already spectacular defense that has been showing out over the course of training camp and is only going to get better moving forward. And speaking of that defense showing out over the course of training camp, they have a big time test coming up as Michael Thomas gets closer and closer and closer to being a full-time participant. How did his day in 7-on-7s go? We'll break that down and project forward what that means for him. And of course, break down everything going on around CJ Gardner Johnson as well as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And we get to do that thanks to our friends over at Built Bar, the best tasty protein bars on the market, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. If you haven't tried the Built Puffs yet, you're simply depriving yourself of joy. Stop that. Enjoy things. Get things that you love. Get things that you like. And now there's a new flavor as well. You ready to hear about it? It's the delicious, indulgent cookie dough puff bar covered in 100% chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again, and they're at it again constantly. So we're talking about the cookie dough chunk puff bar, which is going to get you that light and chewy texture with the marshmallow that's in there. Real cookie dough chunks, and of course covered in 100% real chocolate. I know what you're thinking. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of sugar. Let me tell you about it. Sounds like a lot of calories. No, we're going to talk about that too. Only 160 calories, 15 grams of protein, low in sugar, low in carbs, high in fiber, high in protein, 100% real chocolate. You got to love it. Just doesn't get any better than the chocolatey covered cookie dough on that light texture, chewy marshmallow. Okay, I'm getting hungry. So let me just tell you how to get these. Go over to built.com today. Use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15. You're going to get 15% off of your order of the puffs or all the standard protein bars as well that you absolutely should check out. Once again, that is 15% off of your order with the promo code LOCKED15 at built.com. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Big thank you again for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. And speaking of every day, make sure you drop that your team every day in the comments as you're watching. Really appreciate everybody for being here and for coming through for each of these shows as we continue to do the live shows in the afternoon, the pre-recorded shows in the evenings. Really loving all the support that y'all are showing. So thank you so much for everything as we continue on here with Locked On Saints. I want to jump now to our conversation around Michael Thomas. Boy, it was exciting that first day, that very, very first day of camp when we got out there and we're all standing out on the practice field and all of a sudden Michael Thomas is in walkthroughs. And we're like, wait a minute, that's Michael Thomas. He's out there. He's lined up. Oh, he's running a route. Oh, he caught a pass in walkthroughs. So is he off the PUP list all of a sudden? And that ended up being the case, of course. So now we're starting to see sort of the ramp up period really start to take its next step. Since then, since that moment in the first day of practice, that's all we've seen, right? Michael Thomas in walkthroughs, Michael Thomas in position drills, some individual drills, those types of things. Not really any one-on-ones, no 7-on-7s, no team drills, nothing like in terms of like high-end competition in terms of what you're doing in terms of those drills. But today, that changed. He didn't participate in one-on-ones, but he did participate in 7-on-7s. Jameis Winston went to him with the first two passes. He caught both of those targets. Andy Dalton went to him early in his 7-on-7 drills as well. He caught that pass. So Michael Thomas was an unsurprising 100% catch rate, 3 of 3 in terms of the targets that he received. Again, 2 from Jameis Winston, 1 from Andy Dalton. The things I want to highlight about those plays are his comfort running routes, his confidence in his body to hold up, cutting violently, doing all the things that you want to see from Michael Thomas. He still has some progression to make there. It's not fully what you're used to seeing from Michael Thomas, but it's close. It's getting there, and it's certainly way, way beyond where maybe some of your favorite fantasy doctors, let's just say, as Michael Thomas would say it, expected that he would be at this time. So the other piece of it all, too, is his contested catchability is still very much intact. Those secure hands, the 70-plus catch percentage is still very much a reality for Michael Thomas going into 2022. And I challenge people the same way that I just mentioned with like people looking at Tyrann Mathieu and saying, well, they're not getting the honey badger of LSU, blah, blah. I always challenge people when they say, well, you're not going to get the 2019 version of Michael Thomas by saying like, yes, everyone knows that. It's 2022. It's 3 years later. Of course, you're not going to get the 2019 version of any player in 2022. Hopefully you get either a better version or you're going to get a little bit more of a, you're just going to get a different version. But what we're seeing from Michael Thomas so far begs to question, what version of Michael Thomas are the New Orleans Saints going to get in 2022? Because it's going to be a really good one is the answer. Jeff Nowak and I were talking during camp. He's, of course, from Odyssey. You can check him out over at the Inside Black and Gold podcast as well, along with Steve Geller. He had mentioned something about how what Michael Thomas was able to do in the end of the 2020 season when he came back during the playoffs on a busted ankle. There's no reason to expect that he's going to be any worse than that after 2 years of effectively nursing that ankle, or not nursing the ankle, but recovering from that ankle injury. And so if you take what he did in 2022 while he played on that busted ankle, and then now you look at him playing on a surgically repaired ankle, it's going to be better than that. And still what you got from him out there was the best product that the Saints were able to put on the field at that time at wide receiver, and that many other teams could have put on the field at wide receiver as well. So what are you getting? You're getting a healthy Michael Thomas. And whether that's 2019 version, whether that's a 2016 version, whether that's 17 games of the 2020 version, you're happy with that. Because you also have Jarvis Landry, you also have Chris Olave, you also have Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara, some of these tight ends catching on. Adam Troutman's continuing to have a really good camp. Juwan Johnson's taken some major steps forward as well. You're not going to get the 2019 149 catches, 1,700 yards, and that's okay, because literally no one expects that except for the people that just want to say, well, you're not going to get that version of Michael Thomas. Everyone knows it's okay. Before we jump over to your questions from the live episode today, I got a little sassy there. Oh, geez. I want to speak a little bit on CJ Gardner Johnson and his contract negotiation here. So CJ Gardner Johnson has, according to, it was per Nick Underhill at New Orleans Football that put this out. CJ Gardner Johnson has sort of adjusted his camp participation while working on trying to land a long-term deal with the team. I think this is wise by CJ Gardner Johnson and his team. If you're in the midst of trying to land a long-term contract and a bigger contract than your rookie deal, which you're currently about to be in your which you're currently in your last year on, yeah, I probably wouldn't risk going out there and potentially getting hurt either. Like, especially when you see what just happened with Smoke Monday with the knee injury. We still haven't gotten full clarification on the knee injury, but Smoke Monday did post on his Instagram about, being given challenges and things like that. So it seems it's not great news for Smoke. And so, like, you see that, and then you look at CJ Gardner Johnson, who, despite the fact that he might play like a first-round pick, was a fourth-round selection because the NFL is dumb and missed out on him, right? And so I think that when you really consider the fact that, like, CJ Gardner Johnson isn't, but was a day 3 selection outside of the top 100, even though he should have been a first-round pick, like, of course you're not going to take the field when you're trying to work on a long-term deal, and of course you want that long-term deal. And I've seen some people ask me, do you think that the New Orleans Saints are going to re-sign him? I personally think that they should. He's one of the best slot corners in the NFL. And I've seen a lot of people say things like, well, Alontae Taylor could play his role. Bradley Roby could play his role. Bradley Roby's almost 30. Okay. Let's not get crazy here. He could play in the slot, but for how much longer, right? If you're talking about giving CJ Gardner Johnson an extension, you're talking about the next 4 or 5 years having that position locked down, which is becoming a more and more important position in the NFL, because so many teams are running out there with 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver sets, and spreading the offense out a little bit. So, of course, you want to have a solid slot corner that can do everything else. He can rush the passer. He's great in run support. He's, great in pass coverage. He can cover tight ends. He can cover slot receivers. I mean, let's not pretend like we're just going to copy paste somebody over there. And Alontae Taylor could play his role maybe, but we don't know that because we've never seen the kid take an NFL snap yet, right? So if you're the New Orleans Saints, I think you want to get this contract done just as much as CJ Gardner Johnson and his team wants to get the contract done. And maybe it's just details of the sticking point and everything like that. But I do think it's a smart decision to keep CJ Gardner Johnson around. And it's weird that, like, that's a take. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I just wanted to point that out. Like, yeah, there are players that can technically play his position, i.e. you can line them up where you line him up. But can they do everything that he does as efficiently as he does it? I don't really know. So yeah, you extend the guy and you keep the guy that you have in the room and you give him the paycheck. I think eventually, hopefully, that will be the route that this all goes. All right, coming up next, will the New Orleans Saints offense look different schematically in 2022 versus what we've seen in the recent past? I'll tell you why I think so. And of course, we'll get to more of your questions as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. And of course, we always get the opportunity to do that thanks to our friends over at BetterHelp. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I told you a little bit about them. BetterHelp isn't just like a crisis line. It's not something like that or like a self-help guided thing or anything. It is safe, easy to access therapy, help, right? And I am somebody who personally utilizes BetterHelp. I have no problem saying that, like, I see a therapist and I do online therapy and all that stuff. And I love it because I'm on the road a lot, so doing online therapy is a little bit more convenient, right? First of all, to be able to just do that via video call or even a phone call if I'm not able or don't want to show my face or the Wi-Fi is bad, whatever. Like, it helps in so many different ways that there are all of these different ways for you to get your sessions in and things like that. So you can book those weekly sessions on your laptop, on your phone, through the BetterHelp website. It's super easy. And the thing that I love too is, like, you You answer some questions about yourself first, and then they pair you up with somebody. So it's not just about like who has the space for clients and, you know, the location, like the physical location, how easy it is to get to, things like that. They really actually take the time to pair you with somebody, with also leaving opportunities to change that without charges, just in case it doesn't work out. Because sometimes it takes more than once to find the right fit. And maybe best of all, they have a special offer just for you. Head over to betterhelp.com/lockedon. You're going to get 10% off of your first month. That's a really good saving. 10% off of your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/lockedon. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. We are wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with your questions from the earlier live show. We appreciate you, as always, making Locked On Saints a part of your day. I want to start off with Brian Clement's question here, which I just thought was a great question. Based on what you've seen so far in camp, does the offense schematically look more spread out, or is it still more of a power run scheme? So I will tell you, I can't go into detail about like formations and things like that we've seen, but here's what I can tell you. The New Orleans Saints defense will look a little bit different in 2022 from what it looked like in 2021. And there's two kind of major factors to that. The first of which is that in 2021, you can only do so much with the talent that you had on the field. That's not to be disparaging to the talent that was on the field, but because there were so many injuries and things like that, the talent that was on the field could only be so prepared after a certain point. You've got 4 different quarterbacks. You've got cadences changing. Like Blake Gillikin talked today about how just having a kicker change during the season changes the way that Blake Gillikin has to play his game, because every kicker likes their hold a little bit differently, the pace of things a little bit differently, all of it, right? Their approach is a little bit different. Like there's so many different factors to all of it that change. And so now imagine that, but outside of just special teams, you're a quarterback, right? So there was only so much that you could do, and so you're probably a little bit truncated. We also know that this New Orleans Saints system was very much trying to remain predicated on the short and intermediate area of the game. The New Orleans Saints of 2022 will not be afraid to go downfield and take risks. And I think that's one of the biggest things. But they will still be a run-heavy team. And they will still be a team, I believe, that will utilize gap and zone runs. Because you want to play to Alvin Kamara's strengths, but you have these really good slash runners in guys like Mark Ingram and Malcolm Brown and Antonio Jones Jr. At least one of those guys is going to be on the roster going into 2022. So you're still going to want to have the versatility of playing sort of multiple run schemes down in and down out. And with a guy like Mark Ingram and a guy like Alvin Kamara who can run with both schemes in front of them, that's really, really valuable. So I think that they'll be just as multiple on the offensive side as they'll be on the defensive side, and that they'll continue to move players around. Again, I can't talk about like details and stuff like that, but even in the open practices, which I can talk a little bit more freely about, you can see that these guys are moving in. Like Adam Prentice is lining up on the outside, or Chris Olave is lining up outside and in the slot and things like that. So you're going to see all of that stuff continue. So that's where the familiarity is going to come from. But the thing that's going to be most different is the talent. And then, of course, the ability to attack deep downfield and be a 3-level threat of an offense in the passing game. That will be another big part of it as well. We've got Chris Marks here. Why is Peyton Turner not practicing? We don't truly know yet. I don't know if it was an injury that he sustained during a drill to where he came up at one point, maybe with a little bit of a limp, or if it had something to do with the kind of back and forth that he and Trevor Penning had. We don't know. We're not going to get that kind of detail for the most part, but we just know he's not practicing currently. He's been out for the last couple of days. Hopefully we see him back soon. This one comes from Aiden. Do you think that CJGJ is going to get his contract extension? Again, I think that they should give it to him. I don't know if he will. We'll see. And I don't know if he's going to get it before the season, right? Like the Saints have also shown a propensity to wait. They gave Demario Davis his contract extension after the second game of the season 2 years ago. They gave Marshawn Lattimore a contract extension after the first game of the season. So even if he doesn't get it before the season, there's still a chance that it happens early on in the season. So no need to hit the panic button there yet at that point either. Next up, we'll go to Apollo number 1. What do you think are the chances for the Saints to have another 1,000-yard receiver opposite Michael Thomas, either Chris Olave or Jarvis Landry or both? So if I was going to pick one of those guys to be the 1,000-yard wide receiver opposite Michael Thomas, it would be Chris Olave. Chris Olave and Jameis Winston have a really good chemistry together. Chris Olave is going to pick up some chunk plays every now and then. He's going to be that type of guy that every now and then is going to have that game to where it's like 2 catches, 84 yards, and a touchdown. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to have those moments throughout his career and throughout his rookie season. And so if I was going to pick one of those guys to have a 1,000-yard year, I think it would be Chris Olave. Just his style of play, his ability that will continue to grow after the catch, his speed, all the things that separate him and make him special kind of lend itself from a skill set conversation to be a 1,000-yard receiver. And he might be able to do that his rookie season. The thing that will be interesting is, can the Saints have 2,000-yard wide receivers or 2,000-yard receivers for the first time in like many, many, many years between Michael Thomas and Chris Olave? That will be the really interesting one. And then finally, we'll wrap up here with West Bank Rick. Who is the vocal coach or coaches on the offensive side, and what undrafted player will luck up to the 53-man roster? So the first thing I'll say here is that no undrafted free agent player will luck themselves into a 53-man roster spot. But players that could potentially earn themselves a 53-man roster spot include, of course, tight end out of Pittsburgh, Lucas Krull, if he can get back out on the field. He missed practice today. I would also highlight, of course, Abram Smith, who is starting to come on a little bit. Like, we're seeing some nice runs from him all of a sudden, things like that. So that's really nice to see. Smoke Monday was originally in that category as well. But those are really the 2 guys that I would probably put up there, along with Dejon Dixon, the wide receiver out of Nichols State, who's just like quintessentially a New Orleans Saints wide receiver. Like, if he can show that he can be a better Traquan, then that would give Dejon the opportunity to take that spot. To get to your first question, though, who is the vocal coach or coaches on the offensive side? It's Doug Marrone. 100% Doug Marrone. And the Saints have a really interesting setup with Doug Marrone, right? Like, he's an offensive line coach, but he's also a former head coach. He's a former offensive coordinator for this very team. And so there's like a little bit of insurance there with a guy like Doug Marrone too. Like, let's say that something happens like last year to where Sean Payton wasn't able to coach for a game due to COVID. If that happens with Dennis Allen, you know, we hope that that's not the case, of course. But if something like that were to happen, then Doug Marrone's probably your interim head coach for that game, right? Like, there's a lot of opportunity with a guy like Doug Marrone on the field. And so he has very much been like the vocal guy that you hear all the time. And I'll tell you too, on the defensive side, Ryan Nielsen and Chris Richard, they both own that title over on the defensive side. That is for sure. Those guys are very, very vocal, constantly communicating with their players. Really cool to see. All right, Colin. Coming up tomorrow, right after practice, we'll be live here on the show on the Locked On Saints YouTube page. Make sure you come through for that. That way you can get your questions in for the evening show. Tomorrow, I'm mostly going to be keeping an eye out on how Tyrann Mathieu progresses, how Michael Thomas progresses as well. But I'm really interested to see what else Chris Herndon can do. So we'll update all of that and much more in terms of the biggest story, biggest plays of the day, all of that in tomorrow's episode. I appreciate you, as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget to go and check out that Locked On NFL podcast as your second listen of the day. Go over and let them know that the New Orleans Saints are your team every day. See if we can flood those comments over there a little bit and show some New Orleans Saints love. I just want to pick on somebody for a little bit. So go do it. I appreciate you, as always, making me a part of your day, for making me a part of your routine. If you see me, say hi. I'll be with you tomorrow. And of course, for everything you need around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.